Well, let's talk a little bit more about Hillary Clinton and a controversial remark that she made regarding Nancy Reagan, HIV/AIDS, and Ronald Reagan that has caused some controversy here in South Florida. Let's take a listen.
Because of both President and Mrs. Reagan, in particular Mrs. Reagan, we started a national conversation when before nobody would talk about it, nobody wanted to do anything about it. And, you know, that too is something that I really appreciate with her very effective, low-key advocacy, but it penetrated the public conscience and people began to say, hey, we have to do something about this too.
Now, Hillary Clinton issued an apology for those remarks after they caused some conflagration in the LGBT community, saying, while the Reagans were strong advocates for stem cell research and finding a cure for Alzheimer's disease, I misspoke about their record on HIV and AIDS, and for that, I'm sorry. Let's bring in Michael Rajner. He's an HIV/AIDS activist here in Florida, another friend of mine. This is just friends of mine that are coming around here. I saw your face, even as that conversation with our Andrea Mitchell was being played back, and the face was not a positive face. What do you think? Hillary Clinton, how big of a hole did she dig with those remarks?
Well, you know, first, Joy, as you know, I'm a person living with HIV/AIDS for 20 years. Moved down from New York City into Florida here, live in Broward County. And my heart sunk because at the time, the whole issue around the Reagan White House, you know, in 1981, when Larry Speakes, the press secretary, laughed, made jokes to one reporter who actually asked, well, do you have GRID? You know, do you have this gay cancer? And it was before they actually called it AIDS. Yeah. It's for me as a person living with HIV/AIDS, it was so hurtful to listen to a lot of the things that were going on. You know, Secretary Clinton did not have to even touch the subject. When Andrea Mitchell interviewed her, she asked about the Brady Bill.
Right.
She never touched on HIV, and while I'm appreciative that Secretary Clinton tried to find a way to integrate the importance of HIV in her message, which is something that's largely absent. You know, we have Trump, we have all these other insane people running for the presidency. You know, I appreciate the Secretary's amazing platform around HIV/AIDS. It's still yet complete, though.
Right, yeah. And what about her apology? Is that enough, in your view?
It wasn't. It wasn't. It was a quick, immediate response, but a lot more needs to be done.
And what do you think she needs to do now? Because, look, LGBT Americans are an important part of the Democratic base, voting base, but also donor base. We saw the pressure that gay and lesbian donors put on Barack Obama around things like DOMA and Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2010. What does Hillary Clinton need to do further than that apology?
I think, you know, aside from the donor base, one of the things that's missing here is many people living with HIV/AIDS don't have deep pockets. And I think what Hillary forgot to do was to talk about the dignity, the respect, the homophobia that played a role, that thousands of people died from a disease, were shunned by their families. She missed the harm and ripped at scabs that have not yet healed from back in the 80s for many gay people who were shunned from their families.
And we know that Florida is sort of ground zero for the continuing HIV epidemic, right?
It is. We just ousted the Surgeon General, Dr. John Armstrong, who Rick Scott, the state Surgeon General that Rick Scott had in for 3.5 years, unconfirmed. I was glad to be part of that effort to oust him from the state so that we get better leadership. We in Florida are suffering under the Reagan-esque epidemic of HIV/AIDS, where even the Surgeon General didn't want to speak about HIV.
Should Hillary Clinton come here?
I want Hillary actually to come here, and I want her to come to Broward County. I want her to meet with actual people living with HIV/AIDS, not big donors. I want her to actually hear some of the stories. I believe in her policies. I voted for her in my vote by mail. I still do believe in her. I've met her in person. I've met Bill Clinton, and, you know, on a rope line, we talked about HIV/AIDS. And, you know, when I mentioned I was a person living with HIV, he completely stopped in his tracks, and he backtracked to come back to me, held my hand, and we spoke for about 3 minutes while people were like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
And, you know, I know they genuinely care about the issue and have shown leadership. But I think that some of it gets lost in these campaigns, especially when you're hearing the rhetoric around Trump. You hear Rubio, who doesn't talk about HIV, you know, who comes from this state, who's down here in Miami, Miami leads the nation. And so we need to have some face time as people living with HIV.
Yeah.
The other thing I really do want is, you know, there's a survey, a questionnaire to all presidential candidates that just recently went out. Last night, about 1 in the morning, I demanded from the campaign that they respond by Monday to the presidential questionnaire that's put out by AIDS Foundation of Chicago, AIDS United, AMFAR. the Foundation for AIDS Research, Health Gap, Project Inform, and so many other organizations, including a coalition that I was part of people living with HIV/AIDS, of network of individuals living with HIV/AIDS. And so I think that it's important that Hillary speak to us directly and have a meeting with us. I'm hoping that she meets very quickly with some seasoned activists who have lived this, to hear from us the pain, to learn more. But I believe she's there, but she still needs to make certain commitments around the issue of HIV criminalization that is just horrendous in this nation.
Well, Michael, will you keep us up to date? Let us know if the candidates do respond to that survey, and if Hillary Clinton comes down, we'd definitely like to follow up with you. Thank you.
I absolutely will, Joy, and thank you for having me on.
Michael Reid, my friend, Fernand Amandi, Steve Shale, in the box, coming to us from, I believe, Tallahassee. Thank you all for being here. Really, really appreciate it.